Welcome back to the Corrado build. Today we will be working on the 3.6 that's going into the Corrado. I recently just got this thing painted and made it look nice so I can put it in the car. And in the middle of doing so, I took the timing covers off and I found out that the timing guide on this timing guide right here had broke off. So I wasn't going to pull the timing covers on this, and I got really lucky that I did. This motor only has like 94,000 miles on it. And I believe that the impact the car was in is what sheared that off. So there's no telling how long that motor would have lasted if I would have just put it in the car, because I don't treat any of my cars very nicely. So that's what we'll be doing today. We're gonna put a whole entire timing chain and guide kit in the car and walk you through step by step, and then include the torque specs and everything. And I have a few buddies who sent me some links, so I'll put those in the description below as well. But let's go ahead and get started on this and get it back in time. Alright, so before we go ripping into this, I want to show everybody a few timing indicator marks so that we can make sure that everything's lined up before you go ripping the timing side of the motor apart. Alright, so on the crank pulley there is a notch on the cover, and those two line up. And then also on the cams there's a slot in the cams. This lockout plate goes in there. Here's the part number on that. And these slots are also offset so that you can't be 180 out on your cams. And if you go over on the other side, there is also a notch on the other side of the crank that lines up where the main cap meets the block. One of these teeth, the one that's marked in orange, if I can get it to focus, it'll be flat or ground on that tooth so you know which one it is. And then also on the oil pump itself, behind there, if you get to looking, there's a marker on the back of the pump, and this orange finger that I have highlighted here should be in the up position. And then you also have a lockout tool for the vacuum pump. They are two different lockout tools for this. One is for with vacuum pump and without. I have the one that's with the vacuum pump, and this is the code for that one, the part number for that lockout tool. And I'll put that in the link in the description below. So we'll go ahead and start, and we will remove this upper tensioner and this lower tensioner. Alright, so I went ahead and took the chain tensioners off, and I was looking through the link that I put in the description below. I'm also following that same one. And it says to line the vacuum pump up with a timing mark on the lobe. And mine is 180 out once I started looking at it. I messaged a couple buddies of mine, and they also said the same thing. Because we're using the schematic from Volkswagen, I would rather follow exactly what that link says. So I'm going to take this, once I take this chain off, I'm going to take this and flip it 180 to make sure that it's exactly the way that Volkswagen had it. That's not something that you all have to do, but it's just something I'm going to do to make sure that I don't have anything mess up on me. So when we get to that point, if you're wondering, I will be lining this timing mark up. Alright, so next I'm going to go ahead and remove these two guides, these upper guides. We're going to take these two pins out and this one bolt out. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and remove these two adjuster bolts and get these off. That way I can get the upper chain off. When you're doing this, if you're taking them off and torquing them, make sure that you counter hold this with a 27mm wrench, and also make sure when you're torquing it to not have your lockout tool in there, as you will bend it and end up messing it up. Alright, so since I got that upper chain off now, I'm going to go ahead and spin this around 180 and put this timing dot that's supposed to be on this lobe in its correct location. Alright, so what I'm going to do is just use the tool. I don't want to grab this and mess it up or like scratch it or mar it up any. So I'm just going to use the tool to grab the end of that lobe and actually rotate this. And if you can tell, there's a indication mark on the top of that. It lines up with this marker. So we'll go ahead and put this back on, and then we'll continue with the timing. Alright, so we're going to get ready to take the oil pump bolt out, as well as the lower chain and the lower guide. You have to take these two pins out. When I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and double check my crank on both sides and make sure that my timing mark hasn't moved. A little bit of information on this bolt. If you have an earlier 3.6, make sure that you change this grade bolt from an 8.8 to a 10.9. A lot of people have been having issues with it backing out on them. Luckily I have a 2012, so mine's a later model. I won't have to mess with this, but just for information for people that have an earlier model, make sure you do that. Oh wow. Alright, so taking this apart just now, I did not know that was broke right there. So there's been 2 occasions on this timing setup then that this is messed up. So this is another good example of reasons why you should really, no matter if you have a 3.6 that has 10,000 miles on it, 20,000 miles on it, make sure you all understand that you should really pull the timing covers off regardless, just to check if you're going to be beating on the car, if you're going to be building a car that's going to be reamed on constantly. Make sure you check this, because I was not going to pull these timing covers off, and this could have been a catastrophic failure of this motor in 2 different occasions. Also, I want to go ahead and say that when I did undo that oil pump bolt, this did move on me. So if y'all are doing this, make sure you double check, it doesn't hurt. Alright, so I took the VVT cover off. I talked to a couple buddies and I've read a couple forums that say that nothing but problems come from the screen that's behind here. You can purchase the whole entire thing with the screen from Volkswagen, but you can't purchase just the screen, so most people are just taking them out and getting rid of them. Also, I want to note that when I was looking at clocking these rings on here, there's like little slivers of metal all over these rings on both sides. So before you all go putting that VVT cover back on, make sure you clean those off so it doesn't end up in the bearing surface. Alright, so the housing's back on, and these bolts get torqued to 8 Newton meters or 71 inch-pounds. And then we're going to go ahead and install this guide right now. So you just want to push it until it clicks. It's got 2 fingers on the back side. They clip into place. Alright, so right now we're about to go ahead and install both phasers with the chain as well. We're going to go ahead and on this chain, you see that there is 2 links that are copper, then there's 3 in a row. You want these 2 links to be at the top where your cam phasers are. So you'll be like this. And you'll go ahead and lower the bottom side down in there and just kind of set this up here, if it'll stay by itself. Alright, so I went ahead and got these phasers both on only finger tight. They're these copper links that I was talking about that are in the cam phasers. they line up with these arrows. One says 24E on the left side, and then the right side is going to be 32A, and there's an arrow. And those will line up again with the copper links. All right, so you're going to go ahead and install these two guide pins and then torque them to 10 Newton meters. Alright, so we went ahead and got the lower chain on. Now we're about to install this oil pump gear. You need to make sure that this is flat facing up and that this line with the hole in it is lined up with this marker on the oil pump itself. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and install the lower chain tensioner, and then we're going to torque the bolts to 8 Newton meters. Alright, so I kind of wanted to highlight a little note here in case anyone else runs into the same issue. So on all the links that I found to do the timing chains on these, it's for earlier model 3.6s and not later models. So some of this stuff may vary or may be a little different. On this gear right here, it's a one-piece gear, whereas the earlier models are two-piece, so I don't think it says this in any of them, that you need to have this upper chain on before you go setting this gear for the last time, or else you will not be able to get this upper chain on the gear, because the steps say to go ahead and torque this bolt and then mess with this chain afterwards. If you do run into that problem, all I did was, I don't have this guide in right here for the upper guide, and all I did was take the exhaust cam phaser off, drop the chain enough to get it around there, and then set my cam phaser back in where it needs to, and then hand tighten it again. But just in case anyone else has that issue. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and torque this oil pump bolt. It gets torqued to 44 foot-pounds, and then an additional 90-degree turn. Alright, so since we have the upper chain on, I'm going to go ahead and install the upper guide. You want to install this pin and torque it to 18 Newton meters. Alright, so I went ahead and slid this guide in there while I had the upper chain. You want to torque this pin to 10 Newton meters, and you want to torque this bolt to 23 Newton meters. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and torque these two cam phaser bolts. Make sure that you take your lockout tools out, and make sure you have someone counter hold this, and you want to do 60 Newton meters and an additional 90-degree turn. Alright, so we're going to install the new upper tensioner. Right now I have the new one sitting in a thing of oil. That's something I always did on my 2 8-liter. So I don't know if you have to do this on a 3.6 or not. And then we'll go ahead and install it into the head very slowly. You want to go ahead and torque this to 50 Newton meters. Alright, so the 3.6 timing is completely done. I went ahead and I pulled my lock plates out and spun the crank a bunch of times to make sure there wasn't any interference. and I went ahead and make sure that I put it back at TDC and checked all my timing marks, and they're all good. So I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.